Hey guys, we're going to be talking about cholerics in relationships today.
Part 1 of a 4-part series that we're focusing on. We did a lot of work on our own temperaments and coming to a place of self-awareness, but that's not where we want to stop. Like, we're created for relationship. And so how do our temperaments actually incline us to enter in relationship? Where do they get in the way sometimes?
Yeah.
Some good insights for you.
Yeah. So stick around.
See you in there.
Hello.
Welcome back. Your hair looks great, babe.
Thanks. We are going to be talking about cholerics in relationships today. Okay, Matt, let's talk about why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about the temperaments in relationships?
Yeah, so we just got done doing a month in the academy focusing on what our primary temperament is and coming to understand what are the natural vices, virtues, weaknesses, strengths that are associated with that. So it was really a great gift in self-awareness. Now, what's the purpose of self-awareness? We want self-awareness so that we can identify some of those defects that we can bring to the Lord to perfect in us, so it improves our ability to really be a self-gift to somebody else. To the extent that we are unaware of our vices, we're still bound by them in some capacity. And if you're not free, you can't really enter into relationship, right? So to the extent that you're free, you can enter into a greater relationship. So the temperaments are a great tool to help grow that self-awareness. You can identify some of those flaws to work on, bring them to the Lord, find some freedom, enter into relationship.
Yeah, temperaments are habits of thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so for us to say that that has nothing to do with how you enter into a relationship would be silly. So,
it's a natural starting point.
The other day too, I was coaching in the academy, and it was funny because this month we're just focused on self-awareness and like your own strengths, weaknesses, so on and so forth. But everybody was getting coached on how to change the other's temperament. So I'm like, okay, so this is good. This is a confirmation that we are moving into the next month. Yes. So when we talk about the different qualities of the choleric, specifically in relationships, but also like qualities, like, I mean, I guess we could like slap on a label and call them good and bad qualities. But really what we're talking about is like, these are their tendencies towards it, and they can become good if they're virtuous, meaning they're balanced, or they could become bad if they're vicious, meaning that they lack charity and create disconnection and they're imbalanced.
Yes. And also talking about, just real quick, laying the foundation here for the conversation on just really an important aspect of relationship, okay? It's really grounded in that Catholic anthropology, the understanding of who we are as human persons. We have this interior life. We're also objective beings, but we have this interior life, right? And so we want to be able to share that interior life with somebody else, right? Think about our end, the beatific vision. That's what we are all created for. It's a seeing relationship. You are seeing God face to face. He is seeing you. There's a nakedness without shame. We're going back to the original, one of the original experiences that John Paul II talks about in his theology, the body of Adam and Eve in the garden, nakedness without shame. So in relationship, we want to be able to see the other person for all they are, receive them, love them in that place, but we also want to be able to see interiorly. Where are we? Love ourselves in that place. Experience the love of another in that place, perhaps where you feel most unloved, right? Experience the love of God in that place, perhaps where you feel most unloved. And so when we're looking at how these natural habitual ways of thinking, feeling, and acting based on your temperaments can incline you to enter into a relationship, what we're saying is, where are you inclined to see the other person well? Where are you inclined to see interiorly well? Where are you inclined not to see the other person well? Or not to see, like, stay in your blind spots yourself, okay? So we're going to be talking about this in that context. So when we say good, bad, ability to see the other person, see ourselves.
Yes.
Erin.
Great. So some of the qualities of a choleric in a relationship, some people might label these as good. They could become overuse patterns. They could actually, become imbalanced. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about these things.
Always needs to be virtuous.
Yes. They are independent, they are forthright, they are capable, they are confident, they are intelligent, they are willful, they're decisive, they're productive, they're tenacious, they're fearless, they're energetic, they're goal-focused, they're hardworking, and non-complaining. So if you are in a relationship with a a choleric, you probably would notice a lot of these things. You probably would have no problem letting them lead you, right? Like letting them be a leader of some sort, like in a family, or if maybe you have kids who have this, who are choleric, and you just see like them always leading other kids around. Like this is...
They take charge and they do well when they take charge.
That's
like
right.
Everybody benefits.
Right. But there are qualities that you kind of want to look out for too. And these kind of are leaning towards the vicious side of things. So these are kind of some of those overuse patterns, some of those qualities taken to the dark side, if you will.
And when we say vicious, consider where's this attribute that Aaron's going to lead to? Where is it impeding their ability to see the other person or to see something interior of themselves?
Yes. And what fruits is it leading you to? Or is it actually allowing you to grow in charity or to grow in vice, in sin? So, okay. So the qualities to keep an eye out for in the cleric, they are judgmental. They can be judgmental in that they use their reason and their will. They're very high intellect and their will to get things done. And so they see other people who maybe not as capable or confident as them. And so they're like, okay, why aren't you working on this thing?
Yeah, and they make that judgment based on their own soda straw perception of reality themselves. So where's the lacking in seeing here? They're not really getting curious about what the motivations are behind the other person. So when we stand in that seat of judgment, we're standing in a place of authority, right? That we have the knowledge to actually judge justly in this case. We're not really meant as human persons to stand in that place of judgment, especially if we don't lack all the knowledge. And so where this can be an impediment to seeing the other person is we presume that we already are seeing them, but really we're seeing them through our lens. We're not really getting curious as to what's going on in their interior life.
Which is something that we would suggest to do. Actually get curious about the other person. They can be stubborn. They can think that their way is the right way and that there's no other way. There's no like give there. But like once they kind of get curious and ask maybe like, oh, maybe there is another way, they could actually kind of move from that place of stubbornness to being like, maybe there is a more effective way.
Yeah. And there's that inability again to see potentially another way, but also maybe there's a hang up. Maybe there's a reason why they want to be stubborn. They think that's a better thing to just have their way, because what does it mean if they don't get their way? What does it mean if they get it wrong, right? That might be something that they're failing to see interiorly for themselves. And so now they're bound by this, I have to be right.
Yes. And that kind of follows the opinionated. I mean, they are like melancholics. Melancholics do have a lot of opinions. They also kind of think they're right. They think there is a right way. But cholerics will share their opinion. Melancholics will not. They'll be a little bit more introverted and reserved with their opinions, but they'll certainly think them. So there is that opinionated aspect. There's also a lack of empathy. Cholerics, because they are action-oriented and goal-oriented, they can look at people as human doings and not human beings. So it's kind of like, how is this person going to help me achieve my end? And so we want to kind of shift that a little bit.
Right. People never want to be means to an end. And again,
you're not loving someone.
Right. Yeah. You're not seeing the fullness of the person. So empathy is a way of connecting specifically by emotion. Again, clerics can be very reasonable. It's a strength. They're very reason oriented, but they can also be reason oriented to the neglect of their own emotional life and to the emotional life of other people. All right. So again, we're painting broad strokes here, but to the extent that we're neglecting or we're dismissing our own emotional life, we're not really possessing it and being able to offer that. We're dismissing that aspect of ourselves. So it can't be a total gift at that point. We're also being dismissive of the other person's emotional life. So there's something that's painful in having an important part of you, important human part of you, dismissed. What else, Aaron?
Finally, anger. And we're going to pause here for a second. Anger, remember, is one of the 11 passions of St. Thomas Aquinas, that he breaks down the 11 passions, the concupiscible appetite and the irascible appetite. But anger is a complex emotion or a complex passion in that it actually is, it's morally neutral, just like all of the other passions, and it depends on what we do with it, right? So like if it's leading us to vicious behavior, we could say it's a vice, the vice of anger. If it's leading us to virtuous behavior, we can just say it's morally neutral, or it's like a just action, if you will.
Just anger. Yeah.
Yes, just anger, righteous anger. So anger is a combo of two emotions. Sorrow, which is the belief that a perceived evil is upon you right now. And it is an inconquerable evil. It's an evil that you cannot fight against. So it's a combo of sorrow and hope. Hope is, I believe something could be better. I believe that I could actually reach this end that I want to. But specifically in anger, hope is this belief in vindication, this ability to
restore the injustice.
Restore the injustice. So anger always leads to action of some sort because of that hope element, because of that movement towards trying to restore the injustice.
So an example could be that I remember, I'm just going to pull it from Father Chad Ripperger. You're watching the soccer game. All right, your kid's on the field. All of a sudden, he gets body checked by some opposing team. And you immediately feel this anger. Why? Because there's sorrow, like in the perceived evil that your son has been hurt by somebody else. And the desire for vindication may show up in you yelling or fighting the other parent. Breaking out into a big brawl in the stands at the thought that now I can create this perceived injustice. I can somehow vindicate this through my actions, find some sort of restoration or rest in vindication of the injustice.
Yes. Great. So if you are a choleric who kind of leans towards anger or frustration or impatience or some version of anger, like there's, you could be like defensive, you could show up, like I said, frustrated or whatever, impatient. I highly recommend you do this work that we're going to share with you right now.
Yeah,
it's thought work on this.
And I love this, what she's got, what you put together here and laid out, because it's supremely practical. Just to kind of lay a real quick background to this. Why are we focusing on anger for the choleric? Well, kind of from a phenomenological perspective, we see like this is one of the predominant passions that is seen in the choleric. So it's just common that we've seen.
And also a predominant fault moving into the vice of anger.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. But consider what distinguishes the temperaments apart from one another. It's the way that they respond to a stimulus, right? The speed, the intensity, and the duration of their response. And so we think of passion being a very quick anger response that's intense, and then it lasts, it lingers for a bit.
Yes.
If that is how the choleric is inclined to respond, anger certainly follows that trajectory.
Yes. Yes. And here's another thing too, to remember, to remind the cholerics out there that you're probably not going to be able to interrupt it right in the moment. So when you're new to this work, when you're kind of learning self-awareness and everything like that, like chances are you're going to be reflecting on it from like last week or yesterday or this morning. And like you're kind of calmed down at this point.
You want to be removed.
Reasonable, and you can be rational looking at this.
Removed from the actual emotion. It will these things that Erin's going to share, it's going to be very difficult to do if you're sitting in the anger right now.
But I think you will like it if you are a sober thinking choleric after the fact. I think you will like it because it really engages your reason in this.
Which is a strength.
Yes. So what we want to do is you want to kind of identify the last time that you felt angry with somebody else. You can name the person. I also recommend you apologize to the person. Hey, sorry, I flipped out or whatever. Whatever you did, don't make it up if it's not authentic or true. But just, really kind of work on that ability of apologizing. I think that's going to be so huge in you helping you grow in the virtue of meekness and clemency, which counters anger.
Yeah, and if you don't know if you really need to apologize yet, after you go through these steps, it's going to be much clearer.
You probably will. Yes. So identify what type of anger was it? Was it? I mean, and if you can't really be that specific, that's fine. Just call it anger. But it could be like defensive, frustrated, whatever. Some of
resentful.
The ones resentful. Some of the other ones that I suggested before. And then we want to kind of break apart the anger, that complex passion of anger. We want to break it down to sorrow first and then hope, right? So like that hope for vindication, that sorrow of this perceived injustice upon me. So we're breaking this down into thought work. The first question, I want you guys to get paper and pen, write it out, and follow us here. And then take this to a journal. So identify that last time, be very specific. This is what was happening. Then say, what injustice has been done? Okay. Or you could say, what evil is upon me currently? So you could ask one of those two questions. So like, or what evil was upon me currently in that moment when I was angry? You could kind of reflect there. But we want you to be very specific and also not edit yourself in this question. So answer this question in an unedited way.
Yeah. And it's a perceived evil, right? I think that's an important piece into.
Yes, okay. Which we will get into here. But you're right. Oh my gosh, my earring just fell out. You're totally right. It is a perceived evil, and that's a very powerful word right there. Perceived. Perception is a thought. It's an opinion. It's
optional.
It is optional. So we're kind of questioning too, like this supposed evil or injustice that's been done to us. What is the level of injustice or evil? So on a scale from 1 to 10, you know, it's like, I'm just like so annoyed. Maybe that's like the nuance of anger. I'm so annoyed my wife never finishes what she says she would do, which has never happened between us, Matt and I, in our relationship. Never.
So it's happened once or twice.
But what is that level of injustice? So if you could like actually put a number like on it, what would that be? We're just identifying. What we're doing is the first question, we're like in it, we're writing all the stuff, we're being unedited there. And then now we're taking a step back and going, okay, we're thinking about our thinking here. What is this level of injustice? We're judging it, and we are using reason to walk through this. What exactly was or is the injustice or evil against? I think that's a really big question. Like, is it against myself? Is it against my ego? Is it against my to-do list? Is it against my plans? Is it against
my family, my church,
my truth,
my goal?
Yes. So like, be specific. What is this injustice against?
What's the thing that's been harmed?
Otherwise, right, exactly. Because otherwise, how could we call it an injustice if there isn't an object of that injustice?
Yeah. So for example, like if we're considering like, okay, the sterilization of a puppy or a dog versus the sterilization of a person.
Yes.
Okay. Like the dignity is different in those things, right? And so one is a grave evil and one is actually really not evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
The puppy is the not evil one. Okay. Like that, just to be clear here. Okay. Like sterilizing other is grave evil, right? Okay.
Okay. So what does this perceived evil show me that I love? So this is really identifying an attachment. And you know what? Here's the thing. Maybe it is like, I really love truth. I really love my family member. I really love my daughter. And it's showing me that I really love this person. I probably wouldn't even question that. But then also it'd be like, if it's like an attack or an injustice against your ego, now we're kind of identifying some other attachments that maybe aren't so neutral.
But even like when we think about the greatest good, okay, and
yes.
and sometimes it's like, well, I'm attached to, you know, my daughter's happiness, okay. Your daughter's happiness is not the supreme good. Right. It's not, okay. It's a good. It's a great good, but it's not the supreme good, right? And so, you know,
everything will fall short.
Right. So there is it's really identifying what is the thing to which I am attached, right? Because to the extent that we're attached to a material good or some good on this side of heaven, it's actually going to stand in the way of our being rightly attached to God.
Yes.
Attachments to God alone. That is what we were created for. And so there's even some extreme letting. I mean, think about how detached the Blessed Mother needed to be to her son, standing there at the foot of the cross, right? In that submission, because she had such a great attachment to God alone, like God's love alone, right?
Ooh, that's that's trippy because
there's a submission.
Wouldn't you say that she's attached to Jesus, who is God?
I know it is trippy here, but like that's even like the side story of like, I remember listening to a talk on the presentation of Jesus in the temple, what's going on there. Like literally what is happening to like the first century Jews, what they saw as that is not this nice kind of baptismal moment that's a rite of passage, but literally it harkens back to Abraham saying, I am willing to sacrifice my son, like bringing the son to the altar. Like if God demands it of me, I am willing to sacrifice even unto the death of my child. Yes. I'm willing to do it out of love for God. Like that level of attachment, that's extreme level of detachment to something that is extremely good, right? But towards the end of being attached to the, like so perfectly attached to the will of God, right? Mm-hmm. Chew on that one. I know that's, as a parent, that is difficult for me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you made that distinction there.
Yeah.
Because you're right, because we can just judge things as being like, oh no, that's a good attachment. It's like, well, but it's also not your greatest in that you're not being attached. If it's not God, it's not the greatest attachment that we are all put here to become attached to.
Yeah, and so it's like that's an opportunity to ask God.
Yes.
For like, or not to just be dismissive of your kid, but teach God, teach me how to be detached here, be perfectly attached to you.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know if I have this good question here, but I'm going to add in another question. Is this perceived evil an actual evil?
Yeah. Is it truly immoral? I think it's
yes. Is it truly an immorality? Is it truly an evil?
Objectively speaking.
Right. Objectively speaking, in that, because like, and guys, the whole point of our intellect is to align our subjective truth, which is just our experience and our perceptions, to objective truth. So like, if we're not doing that correctly, it's going to backfire and it's always going to lead to vice. Like if we're not actually lining up our subjective truth to objective truth. So
to reality.
Great question.
Yes.
Is this perceived evil an actual objective evil, in immorality? And how do we know? Like if we are to say, oh yes, it is an objective evil, how do you know? How do you know that to be true? What is your evidence for that? Like,
what's your source?
Right. Is it scripture? Is it the catechism? Whatever. Like what is, how do you know that to be true?
That question will really shake out any sort of self-referencing argument that you have.
Thank you. And is this perceived evil really unconquerable? Like, is it something that you cannot conquer at all? Maybe you can. Maybe to answer that question, maybe you're like, oh no, I mean, actually I probably could just do it this way or whatever it is. Or, I mean, this is a great question to help you come up with a solution. And I think probably more effective solution.
Well, it helps you get into the reality of like, am I really resting? Have I just accepted to rest in this injustice, this perceived injustice? Or is there a way for me to like, is it inappropriate for me to be angry right now? Maybe I can be a little bit more, hopeful.
Yes.
In this, because it's not quite upon me yet. There's another way.
Right. Exactly. Yes. But I think that just moves you out of a place of powerlessness.
Right. So all those questions that you just went through were really kind of getting into the sorrow side of it, and kind of doing a little work to see, okay, what's the evil? What's the self-perception?
And using your reason. And you guys are going to love this, like as clerics. It's just like, it's such a reasonable way of just like thinking about your thinking. I bet if you do this stuff, you will kind of look back and go, you know what, I'm maybe not as angry or not as sad even. I mean, not as like sorrowful right now. You'll probably never admit that you're sad, but just know that anger comes from a combo of sadness and hope. Okay,
yeah, so but think about these things too as like somebody that's in relationship with the cleric. These are great questions to be able to ask this person as well. Like, yes, okay, I can see you're really angry. Like, what's the harm that you think is like? What's the injustice? Yeah. What's going on? Like, obviously, something has set you off. Like, not to say why you angry. Like, ask it. What is being harmed right now? Yeah. Where's the harm?
Yep. Okay, so the next portion of this, we're going to be going into this desire, this hope for vindication, this desire for vindication, and we're going to ask a couple other reflection questions. So we've just answered the ones, and we're like identifying, is this really a perceived evil? Is this really an injustice? What is this? What are my attachments? So on and so forth. And now we're moving into this action piece, which anger always moves us towards. It's this action. And these are some of the questions too. So write these down. Why do I want to correct this injustice? This is going to identify your reason, like your reason behind it. Do I feel free to not correct this injustice? Is this more of an impulsive thing? Is it a habit thing of mine? Or is it something where I can stop and pause and be like, is this even my role to actually correct this justice? Am I supposed to be correcting this injustice? And do I feel free to not? And that's really going to identify an attachment as well. Or detachment, if you will.
I think that's really a wonderful thing, because oftentimes in coaching, I find that I have clients at times that are indulging in areas that are in, like, whether it's down collecting information over here, or getting a really strong opinion about this political thing over here, or this injustice that's going on in the church. And they get so distracted by a lot of these global things, these global injustices, right? That they really have no ability to have any sort of like real affect any real change. But the sad part about that is they spend their time focusing on those things to neglect on those areas that they can actually have an impact in their own family, correcting some injustice in their family, in their own. They're not doing any sort of interior work with this either. The problem's all outside of them. Right. And then it kind of turns into an echo chamber, or like maybe there's even something that's in the community level or at the parish level that you could be affecting. But it's really like you get wrapped up in all these things. We get wrapped up in things that just they're not any of our business at that point. You know, they're outside of our periphery of responsibility or our area of influence.
Yeah. So that's a great question to ask too, is like, is this even my role?
Yeah.
To
based on my state in life.
Correct this injustice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this question. What is the goal of this act of vindication? Like, so what is the end goal? That will reveal to your intention. And so this is how we know if we are doing a moral act. This is in our catechism. And there's a couple indicators behind actions, and one of them is the intention. Like, what is the goal of this? Or another way of asking that is, what do I hope to accomplish in doing this action? So there's like two ways you could ask that: the goal of this act, or what do I hope to accomplish? And finally, I think a really great question to ask, and Matt, you tell me if there's a better question to ask about this, but I really like this question for a choleric. What looks most like love in this situation? I like how it might be challenging to them, but they like a challenge, or they feel kind of invigorated by a challenge. So I'm wondering if it's like, just open up and expand your mind a little bit and say, what would look most like love in this situation? A just love, even.
I do like that question, and the question that I find most helpful is really what am I failing to see in the other person? Because again, going back to this relationship is seeing the other, allowing yourself to be seen, and then seeing the other person, and not judging or condemning them, but just seeing them and loving them at the place where they're at, and receiving them. That's how Christ loves, right? I like knowing that I have kind of this inclination to invite, like I just want to invite people into my world. And maybe that's not a choleric thing. Maybe that's an everybody thing. But it's like, where am I? Where is perhaps my anger or my judgment?
Creating
disconnect by impeding my ability to really see the other person and get curious about the other person. The best relationships that I have, or the most intimate moments I have, are where I suspend judgment. I even suspend inviting people into my world, so to speak, but get very curious about their own world, which is why I love coaching so much.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, coaching is a great thing, actually, for clerics, just to kind of be like, to grow in that capacity to be curious.
Yeah. So what am I not seeing in the other person?
And a great question to ask yourself, too, when you're in these situations of disconnect, or you're kind of like, oh, here's my goal, and this person's kind of getting in the way of my goal, and is to ask yourself, would I rather be right or achieve this goal, or be connected with my loved one? And be honest with answering your question. Like, would I rather, right now in this situation, would I rather be right or be connected? Would I rather achieve this goal or be connected with this person? And there might be times where you're like, no, I'd rather be right. That is great journal fodder. So go break that to the journal. Okay.
We'll let you keep that thought.
Let's move into how to love and motivate your choleric choleric loved ones. So the first half of this podcast, we talked about if you are choleric, here's like some work you can do. And this second half is if you have a choleric in your life, here is how we motivate and love them well.
Mm-hmm. When you think about motivation, right? What the thing that motivates a person is the ends in which they wish to rest. Okay, so what's their goal? Like they're pursuing something, they're pursuing some end, some goal, and once they achieve that, they just want to sit there. It's their comfy place. All right, and so a lot of the motivations here that we're considering in terms of the choleric is where do they ultimately desire to rest, right? And
right,
how
like
can we
so
get
that's
curious
like the
about that?
object. Like
The
I
object
like,
of pursuit.
I
Yes.
like looking at motivation as the passion of desire. So what actually creates desire in this particular person,
Sure.
in this particular temperament. And then the object of rest is that which they
Object
love.
of desire. Yes.
Yes.
Every desire has an object to which it is oriented, right?
Yes.
Which is directed, right?
So, and I love this because cholerics are action oriented. Don't try to change that about them.
Mm-hmm.
Like in order to motivate them, don't be like, oh no, you need to focus on me or focus on
just sit still.
Yes.
There might be some time when they need to sit still a little bit.
Right, but that has to be their
Mary
choice.
to their Martha.
That has to be their choice.
It does.
You can't motivate people. You can't tell them what to do. I'm sorry. You cannot tell clerics what to do. But you need to accept the fact that they will always be action oriented and goal focused. And that's
Yeah.
okay, but you can use that as a motivational tactic even. So lean into those motivations and that desire, that object of desire, and actually use that language and approach when you're actually talking to your cleric son or daughter or whatever.
Yeah. Get really clear on the goal
Yes.
that they're seeking. And perhaps even like where do they ultimately want to rest? I think this is something that can be applied across the board, but like what is their motivation? And don't be quick to judge their motivation. Just allow their motivation to be whatever it is at that point, and just come to a place of awareness. And then where there's an opportunity to affirm something that is truly noble or truly virtuous in their pursuit, like affirm that and be like, hey, you know what? I would love to be able to work with you, align with you on this goal.
Yes.
John Paul II talks about that being like having that shared personal ends to which you are both willing to go, freely willing to go. That's really the foundation of a truly loving relationship. We're both seeking the same perceived good.
Or
right.
Even if you don't like want to pursue it with them, you could be like, hey, great job. Like that you pursued that and like, awesome. Like support them in that way. There's like so many ways you could support them, but like, I think even just showing genuine appreciation and gratitude to a choleric and like not holding back, like actually telling them that. And if they're right, tell them that they're right too. It's just like.
And that you were wrong, right?
Not necessarily. You could also say there are many ways to be right. But just tell them that they're right.
Sounds a little relative.
Not all the time, though. Like, don't tell them they're right when they're wrong. Like, don't lie to them. We are not
You're
saying
right.
lie to people.
You're left. You're right. You're wrong.
Nobody knows that. It's from Michael Odd working out thing.
Aaron
This guy.
watches 1980s aerobics.
I don't watch it. I do them. I just sit and watch it.
It's bowl of popcorn.
Yes, that would be so weird. Okay, so brainstorm how you can honor them like out loud, honestly. Like just like make a list and be like, you know what? I really appreciate this. Those are all kind of the same. Make space and time for them to relax and recreate. So one thing that we know about cholerics is they love to be productive and they move. Don't really judge it, but just be like, hey, I've created space. And then when they actually decide to recreate and relax, like take a nap on the couch, just make sure it's quiet or like make space for them to do that. And I don't know, like notice it and say, hey, I'm so glad you enjoyed yourself or you took a nap.
But don't be decide when the ways that they choose to recreate are actually very active.
Yes.
Things
and
to do, like I'm going to go for a jog, or I'm going to go for a hike, or I'm going to go to this restaurant, and we're going to hit all of these things, right? And it's going to be so fun. Here's my plan.
Yes.
I'm going to love it.
So this one harkens back to kind of the original one where we were talking about like they're very action and goal oriented, and using language like that I think would appeal to the choleric. And guys, this is like the same tactic I'm probably going to use with all of the other temperaments in changing the language that motivates to a language that motivates. So motivate them with this type of language. Like for instance, like let's just say you're a wife and you're like, I really wish that my husband would spend more time thinking about our relationship or something like that. You could actually help like encourage them like, hey, can we make like a list of like relationship goals? Mm-hmm. Like, and here's how we know that we will hit them. Mm-hmm. Or like, hey, baby, I have a cool challenge for you to think about. And I know you say you're not like motivated by challenge.
I'm not a challenge person, but I know like Lisa Canning is like,
yes,
make it a challenge.
Yes, but like I could be like, hey, wouldn't this be a fun thing, like, or a fun challenge to like try to achieve? I'm totally talking to a sanguine right now, but wouldn't this be? I have a challenge for you. I have a goal for you. Could you create like the best date night for us, like something like that, where you're actually kind of like drawing the relationship stuff into the challenge.
I can tell you this, Erin. I love when you tell me things that you want.
Yes.
She's the worst person to shop for. Like it's just like a guessing game, right? I'm pretty bad at it too, but like when you can give me a clear objective.
Yeah. Yes.
Like of course, like I'm gonna do it. Like even if it's just like, hey, can you give me a shoulder rub? Sure. Yeah, like I can do that. That's great.
Yes. Yes. So clear objectives. That's a great thing to add to this list. Like, how do you make things clear objectives? Don't be aloof. Like, they love it. Cholerics love it when you are direct and you say, this is what I would like. And this is what I would not like, so just tell them that. I like saying like, how could we be strategic about actively growing in empathy? Like we know that like cholerics are not empathetic by nature. And so like, Matt, how could we be strategic about this? Like about like kind of intentionally growing in empathy every single day. Like I really think that would appeal to a cleric. I don't know. Does that appeal to you?
Well, yeah, I would like to like know why that's important. Like, yes. Why is it important to grow in empathy?
That is another great thing.
That's my why question. That's a very cognitive, I'm looking for a reasonable answer here. And if you give me an emotional answer, I will dismiss it.
Yes. So that's another great way to motivate is, and especially even like if you have like kids who are choleric, just saying like no to them, no, because I say so, like that doesn't work. You need to kind of get down on their level and be like, hey, this is why. This is the reason why I'm asking you to not do this. Or this is the reason why I'm asking you to do this. And explaining it to them. And it's the same thing for older clerics, but like they need to know their why. They need to make the decision. Yes. You need to not make the decision for them.
You are literally helping your child grow synaptic connections in their brain that will support them for the rest of their life when you actually give them a reasoned response to their oftentimes very annoying and ill-timed why questions. They're asking it not to be malicious. They're asking it because literally they lack the connections. But when you can give them those connections, it's going to help them to actually be more reasonable when they grow up. And being more reasonable means that they may not necessarily be inclined to be so excessively passionate or excessively angry in situations because they can actually lean on this skill, this attribute that they've developed of having these well-worn neural pathways that help them think through things a little bit better.
Yeah, and another thing that cholerics do is they can go independent and isolate a little bit. So like a great way to kind of have them include you even in their plans is just to say like, hey, how can I support you?
I love that.
How can I support you in this plan? Do you want me just to be like the cheerleader on the side? Do you want me to actually do something? Do you want me to make space for you to finish this? Like what is the goal and how can I support you with that? Presume that they have a reason for what they are doing. Don't presume that they don't. Like, don't say like, hey, have you thought about this? They probably have. But give them the opportunity to explain their reason. Like
first,
if you have like, if you're kind of coming into this situation, you're like, oh yeah, maybe they haven't reasoned through this. Like,
or maybe I have a better way.
Right. Ask them like, hey, like, tell me why we're doing it this way. Have them explain it to you, and then say, okay, like, and then say, like, if they've left any information out that you may have, say, have you considered this, or could this be a part of this solution here? Could this information actually help create a better solution here?
See, I love what you just did, because that is an exercise of, okay, I can conceive in my mind perhaps a better way, but first I am going to choose to see the other person and come to understand. I ask that question, what is your motivation behind this? I understand that you probably have a reason for everything that you're doing here. Can you explain me, like, kind of what's the reason before this? What's your motivation behind this? And you're choosing to kind of create space to see the other person first. Again, that's essential to the relationship. And then once you see them, and you really listen and you really see, right? It's not just paying lip service to this, but you're really seeing it. And it's just like, okay, I can see the logic behind it. Maybe there's an opportunity to even affirm that.
Yeah.
And maybe at that point you're just like, wow, that actually is the best way.
Yeah, that does make sense.
I thought this might work. And
yeah.
Or it's, hey, I understand what you're talking about. I see how you arrived there. I can kind of follow your logic. I have a different perspective on this. Do you mind if I make a contribution here? Like, that is like, now we're presenting in freedom.
Yeah.
And we're respecting the freedom of the other person, the distinction of persons and their free will. And it's like, sure. Like, and then there's this ability to offer this, but like, it's all, and you're able to be seen at that point.
I think that's a great tactic for marriage and working in teams, like as adults. Now, obviously, some of these could apply to children, but like, we also know that children do not have the full functioning reason until their brains are developed.
A lot of gray matter in there.
So like,
squishy little sponges.
Right. We might word it in a different way with our kid. But if we don't want that obstinance and that stubbornness to kind of fight us on that and be like, well, I'm going to do it my way anyway. We want to kind of like ask them, like, hey, do you know, like, can you tell me why you might be doing this? If they get angry, if the cleric gets angry, do not match their anger. Like, don't match it. Just ask yourself, and you could ask them out loud, but ask yourself first, how might they be hurt, or what is the injustice that might be happening? What is being harmed right now underneath this? Because remember, anger is that combo of sorrow and hope. I also like the question, what are they trying to protect right now? Do not break their will. Their will is one of their greatest assets. But introduce more moral choices. This is specifically to kids too. Like, we've learned this in Montessori, where our goal as parents is to present, as the children are developing their will, is to present moral choices,
good options
to them, and then let them make their own decisions. Give them that freedom, because guess what? They already have it. You can't really take it from them. But it's interesting, because like, even just leaving it and saying, like, I trust you to make to make a great decision. I trust you. Right. And really trust them. Don't just say it as a tactic and like a manipulation tactic, but actually, like, trust them. Like, do your own work. If you don't trust them, maybe there are some reasons why you don't trust them, and maybe you need to bring that up in your conversation with them moving forward. But also, maybe you just need to do your own work. And do not nag them to stop working. Introduce a new initiative or new goal. Honey.
Trial by fire.
Yes.
Right?
Is
that where this one comes from?
No, just like, honey, let's plan like the most ideal date. Like, if that's something that you want to bring them from their work to some other place, like, just introduce a new initiative and use that language.
Well, there's nothing wrong with introducing a new initiative, as long as there's a freedom for them to say yes or no.
Right, with no
at that point.
Ultimatums.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, and then, like you said, then it's your work to do. Like, if this person says no to a request and now I'm crushed by this, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to feel crushed. You are allowed to feel crushed by that.
But that is your own work.
But like, it is your own work.
Yeah.
And what we mean by that is, like, come to understand, like, are you going to continue to allow yourself to be crushed by this, like putting so much on this other person? Is there like an objective evil that's going on here, or is it like, okay,
or is
like,
this person just doesn't prefer to do that?
yes, or is this a difference in preferences?
Right. Which I think is like, when it comes to relationships, and I think this is like a good thing to kind of leave this whole podcast off with, there are needs and there are preferences. Please be clear on what that is in your own life. Like, is this really a need? Like, will you die if you don't receive this thing? Or is it a preference? Or is it a promise that you've made? Like, maybe there is something that's within the vows that you've actually took, when you were married.
And even that are you going to die if you don't get this? I mean, it may not be instantly, but I think somebody could, I think it's a good kind of top level qualifier that's there. But you can also be like, well, I guess I don't really need to be heard, or I don't need to be loved, because I'm not going to die if somebody doesn't hear me. But but as a person, you're meant to be heard, and you're meant to be loved, and you're meant to be seen. Like, that's part of who you are and part of your dignity. And so I think that another way of looking at it is like, is this in keeping with my dignity, or is there a violation of my dignity, right? And that's where injustice can be a great gift back to us, because it starts to reveal to us our dignity. When we can recognize that when there's been a true harm, it reveals to us the truth about how we were created and what we were created to experience.
Okay, so they'll be like, do I need this or do I prefer this? I think that's like a good top layer question. And then the need kind of has some subcategories too, where it's like, is this in keeping with my dignity or not in keeping with my dignity? So it's not so extreme, like I will die if I don't receive this. I mean, I kind of like that question. Will I die if I don't, because there are some people who do over dramatize things.
Sure.
Use that word need all of the time. And I'm like, it doesn't apply here. You're not going to you really don't need this. But it's like, is this a strong preference? Is this aligned with my dignity? Is it upholding my dignity? We just don't want people to become like these vengeance collectors and these injustice collectors and be like, that's against my dignity, and it's like not, or whatever. You know, so that's
on this side of heaven, you're always going to be experiencing some sort of violation to your dignity, right? And like, that's just a sad reality to it. And so knowing how to respond to that when it happens, so that you don't go to a place of isolation and become unchristlike, but rather sees that as an opportunity to enter more intimately, perhaps, into a relationship with the Lord. Like, that's where those things can be an opportunity. So it's kind of more identifying them so that we can bring them to Jesus. And, I think in those cases it can be actually it can
really fruitful.
Turn into something. Yeah, exactly. Very fruitful, despite. Good. All right.
That's it.
That's the choleric. Stay tuned for the sanguine, the phlegmatic, and the melancholic.
Stick around.
We'll see you again soon. Take the temperaments test if you haven't, our assessment.
Yes.
It's free.
Do that.
And then we have a dominance. If you want to get more, a really nice, robust report on your dominant temperament, then you can just buy up to that. $9.99, I think.
Also,
what it is.
If you join us in the academy, you get all 4 reports.
Yeah.
You get access to that, and you get coached in the academy on these particular topics. So
it's good to get coached.
Yes. Check us out. Come join us in the academy. Come listen to the rest of these podcasts, and you guys have a wonderful day.
God bless.
Bye.